let's begin and daven that the truth of our learning should help to bring home the hostages, all of the hostages, protect our soldiers and Yisrael and all of the innocents, and bring a speedy end to our conflicts. And Amen. And we'll see about, maybe
Yeah.
maybe there really will be some good news about the hostages. It's very interesting. I shouldn't digress on this a bit. It's very interesting here. Some of the people I spoke to are, in a certain segment of the firm community here, they take a very hard line and they thought it's terrible that they're making this deal. And I said, I said, honestly, I don't know what the best answer is for this.
Yeah. I
Who
agree.
can possibly? But I also told him, I said, I don't think what you understand is that in Israel, the sense that uh, the hostages are still in Gaza is that it has lowered the national morale to
Yeah.
to an all-time low. I said, you really don't understand what it's like.
Yeah. No.
Uh, And I know that they're thinking of everybody wants to do the best, but nobody knows what the best is. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
That's the truth.
So Hashem Yirachim. Anyway, hi Paul. We're just starting now.
Well,
Ah,
Um,
the best is to release the hostages.
the best is to release the hostages. I said to him. I said,
You have to save them. That's no. Just
no,
I can't understand how people pray for the release of the hostages and they are against.
they're against the.
It's simple. Against the yes, the release of the hostages. I can't understand this.
I understand both sides, but I can tell you. I mean, the problem. What's the problem? The problem is it's interesting because last week we touched on this in the Rambam, and we came to I skipped over the story of Sheva ben Bichri, but the story of Sheva ben Bichri was that he was a Mored b'Malchut. After David had come back, David had been exiled from Yerushalayim when Absalom, his son, took over, right? And then ultimately he makes his way back. And when David is coming back, then Sheva ben Bichri basically calls on people to revolt against David, and David's army chases him, and he ends up in a city, and Yoav is about to, they're building a battery into the city to break down the wall and to take it over, and this wise woman from the city catches the attention of Yoav, and she basically tells him, "Look, what do you want?" And he says, "All we really want is Sheva ben Bichri." And she says, "So don't, we'll give you the head of Sheva ben Bichri." And that's what they do. They decapitate him and they give him the head of Sheva ben Bichri. So Sheva ben Bichri was Chayav Mita. He was a Mored b'Malchut. He really had a Chiyuv Mita. And so what they did was Al Pi Din was okay. So that's the exception to this rule that you don't give up. You're not allowed to give up a few nefesh echad b'Yisrael, even if it will save more people, even if ostensibly it'll save more people. But if that person is chayav mitah, then you give them up. So Seder, that's an exception to the rule, but the rule is that you don't give up one for the many. So one of the very difficult issue that we have in front of us is that uh, we're making a deal to release the way it's being expressed now, like they keep releasing, bits and pieces of what exactly is going to happen. But supposedly all of the hostages will be released, Bahadraga. right? They're going to be released over time. That's a very tricky thing. We don't know if that's really going to happen. Nobody knows if it's going to happen. I don't even think Hamas knows if it's going to happen. And but the argument, so you can make an argument, look, let's save whoever we can. And you could also make an argument, if we make the deal now for only, then we only are guaranteed some of them, that means the rest of them are going to die, and then we shouldn't make that deal. So I'm saying I don't know. I'm thank God that I'm not in a position where I would have to make that decision. It's an impossible decision.
Yeah.
But I think I think also this idea that there's going to be some kind of a ceasefire. The part of that I never understood exactly is this. Bon agid that we agree to a ceasefire. Of course, it's a terrible thing to agree to a ceasefire. There should be an absolute victory over Hamas. But on the other hand, I think if there's one thing we can depend on Hamas for, it's to break the ceasefire. Every ceasefire we've had with Hamas, they've broken. Every single one, they've broken. So what difference does it make to us? We should say, fine, let's have a ceasefire, but we can make it clear, like we did in Lebanon. If you break the ceasefire, we're coming in. And I'm not an army person. I don't know strategy. I don't know all these things. But it just seems to me that shouldn't be ma'akev. Like that shouldn't be the thing. But listen, Bezrat Hashem, all of the hostages will be released soon, and at least we'll get some of them. It's just, I was saying to Michael before you came, that people here in the States, I don't think understand the depth of what the hostages mean to people in Israel. Jews all over the world are devastated because of the hostages. But there's a difference when you're living in Israel. You feel that any one of us could have been hostage. Any one of our family could have been a hostage. And so we feel that everyone who went in was part of our family. And it calls man that the government isn't doing every single thing they can to get them out. It feels like a betrayal of the people. I mean, I see you nodding your head. I mean, and the Skarim also say, like, at least 80% of the country feels the same way. And so we have to pray that this really is going to be helpful and people will get out. It's just every time I think about it, I choke up, and it's very, very upsetting. Anyway, with that, I'm sorry, I don't usually digress on these things, but
It's my fault.
no, I'd already touched on it, but just before you came, but say that. Anyway, that's what I have to say about it. Anybody, since we've digressed, if anyone else wants to add anything, I don't want to hold back, but otherwise we'll move on. Tov, so last time we read the beginning of this sugya. Let me get it a little bigger. So let's begin. Let's read it again and just understand it a little bit more in depth before we go on. So, Michael, is that big enough?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine. He ubara de archa itula kame de Rebbe.
It's actually atu.
Oh,
Atu. It's like a ba'u. Atu.
oh, atu the okay. Atu the kame de Rebbe. Amar lahu zilu velechushu la diomeg de kipurehu. Lechushu la ve'irkisha. Pray aleha beterem et sterich bebetan yaditich begomer nafek mina Rebbe Yochanan.
Okay. So now, can you tell us what you read?
There was a pregnant woman who smelled food on Yom Kippur. They came before Rebbe and they said to him, "Go." He said to them, "Excuse me, go and whisper to her that it's Yom Kippur." They whispered to her, and she accepted the whisper. On this verse, it's written in, and um, and, but not yet. Did you need the in the stomach to know, etc.
We'll
And
do that. We'll do
yeah,
the pasuk in a second. That's okay.
okay. And
Nafak mina.
from her came Rabbi Yochanan. He was born from her.
Okay, so wait, let's digress for a second just on the pasuk. I told you the context last week, but let's just take a quick look. We changed the screen to here. So this is the very beginning of Sefer Yirmiyahu, right? Yeah, do you see this?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, okay. דברי ירמיהו בן חלקיהו מן הכהנים אשר בענתות בארץ בנימין. So here, Paul, continue reading from Pasuk Bet. Asher.
אשר היה דבר השם אליו בימי יאשיהו בן עמון מלך יהודה ב-13 שנה למולכו.
Okay.
להמשיך, כן?
Okay.
ויהי בימי יהויקים בן יאשיהו מלך יהודה עד תום 12 שנה לצדקיהו בן יאשיהו מלך יהודה עד גלות ירושלים בחודש החמישי. יש הרבה מלכים.
Yeah. Well, I'll explain that in a second, but let's say, go ahead. ויהי.
ויהי דבר השם אלי לאמור, בטרם, יש פה קריא וכתיב.
Okay, so we're going to read it like this.
את שרך, בבטן ידעתיך, ובטרם תצא מרחם הקדשתיך, נביא לגויים נתתיך.
Okay. So the truth is, for what we're doing today, that's enough.
ליצור, בטרם יצרתי אותך בבטן, כן.
בדיוק.
זה הקודש ברוך הוא אומר, נכון?
Yes, ויהי דבר השם אלי. Right, so
כן,
this is what.
כן, כן.
Okay, so this is Yirmiyahu's first nevuah, and the whole thing with the kings and so forth. This is actually we did this at some point. I did some of this in the shir. When you learn the end of Melachim Bet, beginning with Yoshiyahu. Yoshiyahu is really the last righteous king of Israel, of Yehuda. Actually, he's the last righteous king. And if you remember, he dies when he's put to death by he dies in battle with Paro Necho. When Paro Necho is coming up through Yehuda, and he tells Yoshiyahu, like, don't fight me, I'm not coming to fight you, I just need to go through your land. And Yoshiyahu, for reasons that are not at all clear, decides to fight him, and he dies in battle. And then after that, it's his sons that are appointed either by Paro Necho or later on by Nebuchadnezzar. They become They become the kings. They have a right to the kingship because they're descendants of Yoshiyahu, but the truth is they're appointed as puppets by the big powers, and of course it doesn't work out well, and in the end everybody they get put into galut. So this is just to tell you the time frame, right? Ben Amon, Melech Yehuda. So this beginning, Yirmiyahu's Nivuah begins already in the time of Yoshiyahu, and it continues until
that's the first
Galut.
The first wave of galut there were three galuyot from Yehuda.
Right, there were three waves.
And this is the first one. Mhm.
Well, it goes ad, so it goes ad tom ashtei esrei shana letzidkiyahu ben Yoshi Melech Yehuda ad gelot Yerushalayim b'chodesh hachamishi. That's the last one. In other words, and then when you read it, the story in Yirmiyahu, it's somewhat as you read through Yirmiyahu, you get a lot of details about the comings and goings and the politics and like the internal politics of what was going on. Yirmiyahu is a fascinating uh, book in many ways. But he's there for a very long time, which, by the way, I think it also gives you some insight into the character of Yirmiyahu, who really was, a long-suffering Navi, because here in the very beginning, in this exchange with Hashem, um, Hashem says, I'll protect you, but he already tells him that, people aren't really going to listen to you. So it's a very difficult life that he leads. But what Hashem says to him, interestingly, is "B'terem atzarcha bebetin yidaticha." I already knew you before I created you in the belly. In other words, before you were even conceived, I knew you. Right? V'terem tetzei merechem hikdashticha. Before you left the womb of your mother, I have sanctified you. Navi legoyim netaticha. I've made you a prophet for the nations. Right? Because he's mitnabeh not just for Yehuda, but also for the other um,
Also for the
amim,
Goyim.
also for
Mhm.
goyim around him.
Mhm.
So this is a very, I mean, whatever. Yirmiyahu is an example of this, right? That he's not the only one, but he's one of the people that the Torah goes out of its way to say, or the Torah, the Navi goes out of his way to tell us that
Mitzvah,
Hashem
כן.
had had chosen him before he was even conceived,
Mhm.
and it raises interesting philosophical questions about our personal, or about what our personal choices are and so forth. But in any event, we do see that there's this idea that he was already Yu'ad, right? He was destined for this life as a Navi even before he was born. So we see when we go back to our Gemara, so now, we understand what the Gemara means, because there's a woman who's pregnant and she smells some kind of food on Yom Kippur, and as Michael said, then she smelled food and presumably she wanted to eat, and people didn't know what the din was. They asked Rebbe, and he said, "Go and whisper to her. Today is Yom Kippur." And so they whispered to her, and she accepted what they said. Kari ale, so it was read, literally read about her. In other words, we read kari is used as a verb in relationship to mikra, to Tanakh. We read a pasuk about her, "B'terem atzarcha bebetin yidaticha." So
It's in the Aramaic, it's without Aleph.
without aleph,
In
yeah,
Hebrew, there would be an Aleph. Mhm.
yes.
Mhm.
So kri ale, or
Mhm.
kri alea, um, B'terem atzarcha bebetin yidaticha. So how is this pasuk appropriate? Why did they read this pasuk about her?
They're comparing Rabbi Yochanan to Yirmiyahu as a prophet, Gadol.
Yeah, so what's interesting is they say this pasuk about her. When did they say the pasuk?
As if Rabbi Yochanan is also a chosen one, somebody who was chosen even before he was conceived, like the same way.
In a similar way, but so
Mhm.
when did they say this pasuk?
before he was born.
before he was born. In
Yeah, I
other
think so.
words, right? In other words, so the story is telling us that they saw in her that because she was able to accept uh accept what they told her that today is Yom Kippur, and she was able to hold back from eating. So they said to her, so that it was as if they said, it's as if they're saying, we know that your child is going to be someone special. And here, let's look at Rashi. Here, Hahi Ubara Da'archa Shericha V'Yom Kippurim Haya. All right, so that we know that she smelled something and it was Yom Kippur. The Chushula, so Rebbe said the Chushula. Michael, you can read Bozna.
Va'azna sheyom kippurim hu hayom ulai tuchel lihitapek.
Okay.
So they whispered to her in her ears that it was Yom Kippur and possibly she would be able to restrain herself.
Mm-hmm. Right. In other words, that's what Rebbe said. Whisper in her ear that today is Yom Kippur, because maybe she can restrain herself. And Al Chisha, go ahead, Kibla.
Al Kisha kibla et alichisha pasak uver mituato. That she accepted the whispering and uh, um, stopped her desire, her appetite or desire.
No, so mita'avato. Pasak ha'ubar
The fetus,
mita'avato.
the fetus from its appetite, its desire.
From its desire. So if you
Is this
remember,
the desire of the mother or of
so
the ubar?
so so here, so now we can say something about a question, or at least something that we brought up much earlier.
Mm, mm.
Um, Here in the Mishnah, we had the Mishnah says Ubarashi Hiricha, right? And Rashi said
Um,
Ubarashi Richa Ha'ubar Meriach Reach Tavshil V'hu Mitavelo. This is the way Rashi understood what was going on, that the fetus smells something cooking and he desires it. The ubar, the fetus desires it. V'im'ena ochelet, and if the mother doesn't eat, shneihen mesukanim, then both of them are in danger. So now we have an idea of how Rashi knew that this is talking about what the Mishnah is talking about is the ubar, that really it's the fetus who's smelling something. And why do I say that? Because of this story. Because in this story, what happens? Rebbe says this is, you have to whisper her that, well, I don't want to talk about the whispering in a second, but to, like, tell her today is Yom Kippur. And Rashi explains that um, uh, uh, when she accepts the lechisha, she accepts what they're whispering to her, that the ubar has stopped its desire. How does Rashi know that it's the ubar that stopped its desire? How does he know from the way the story is told that it's the ubar that stopped its desire?
Maybe he thinks of Rabbi Yochanan, who is a tzaddik, and
Well,
then
we don't have to get all the way to Rabbi Yochanan, but what do they say? What's the pasuk that they say? So what does that tell me? When she holds back from eating, they quote this pasuk that even before you were created, I already knew you. In other words, I knew that you would be a Navi. And so how is that applicable here? How do they understand it here?
That the fetus was somehow great. Yeah, somehow
Because,
the tzaddik. Because the fetus stopped desiring the food when he heard that it was Yom Kippur.
right, in other words, they didn't say a pasuk about her, about the mother. The pasuk is about the ubar.
Mhm.
And what they're saying is the fact that she was able to restrain herself is really attributed not to her, it's attributed to the ubar. Well, I don't want to say it's solely attributed to the ubar because the way the story is told, it's Yilchisha. It's a combination of the two, but it means that what they're saying is that they recognize that there must be something special about this baby that's growing inside her, that he was able to hold back his ta'ava so that it wouldn't affect the mother, and then the mother wouldn't have to eat on Yom Kippur. And this seems to me that it's from this story, maybe more than anything else, that Rashi knows that the issue here is this idea of the fetus having the desire to eat.
But the
And
fetus has also ears to hear what, and he understands Hebrew.
why not?
Okay.
Look, it's we don't have to take everything so literally, but
I
but
know that afterwards he forgets everything
yes,
when
right,
the
when
angel
they
is pressing him under the nose. Yes, but
right, he whips him on the nose, and
yeah.
but they on the under the nose, right? But no, but there is a mystical aspect to it. There's a kind of a mystical aspect to this, to say that there's already something in the unborn child that was already showed greatness. And in fact, Nafak Mina Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan came out of it. Rabbi Yochanan was the child that was born. And of course, Rabbi Yochanan goes on to be the greatest, or one of the greatest Talmidim of Rebbe, right? The psak originally came from Rebbe. Now, so that's one thing.
This could have given the Christians all kinds of ideas. No?
Listen, they
It
have
was
other,
about the same. It was about the time when the Christian community grew.
yeah, they have other issues that they're dealing with then. They still, at that time, they're not sure if Jesus is a god or not a god. They, yeah, they have other issues, but um, we don't have to worry about them. But what else is interesting? So we have this story. So based on this story, what halacha or halachot do we get out of this story? Like if you were to write this up just as halacha, what would the halacha be?
It's the way it's written. I get the impression that Rebbe says that it's okay to feed her, but first you should try to convince her not to eat. Not explicit, but
Okay. Okay.
Maybe you are not allowed to do
I
abortion.
want to make you say that.
That you're
You're not allowed to what?
to do abortion.
I didn't hear you.
להפיל. אסור להפיל תינוק.
That I mean, yeah, to but I'm not sure
Shane,
how you see that from
I
the
don't hear you
story.
very well. Mhm.
Go-
No.
Michael, can you
Is it
hear
my
me?
problem or is it? I don't hear
Wait,
you.
uh-oh.
Hey, you're
Maybe
afraid.
is it my problem or
Um,
your problem? I don't know.
I I hear you, but wait, Michael, mute yourself and tell me, can you hear me?
You're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, okay. I all right. It's an internet thing, I
You're okay
assume.
now. I think it's just
No,
internet.
no, it's
Uh,
okay. Now it's okay for the
no, it's
moment.
okay. Okay.
Mhm.
So here, let's go back for a minute. What was the din in the Mishnah? Ubara sheiricha ma'achilina ota ad shetashiv nafsha.
Mhm.
So what's the din for the ubara? The din is that if the woman, go ahead, Michael.
The din is that you are allowed to feed her to settle enough to settle her soul.
Yes. So in other words, if a woman smells food on Yom Kippur and she becomes unsettled, and she needs to eat in order to be settled, then you feed her until her soul is settled. That's the din. The din is that's what you do. But when people went to Rebbe to say, look, there's this woman that smelled food, he didn't say feed her. What did he say?
It tried to suggest to her not to eat.
Suggest her, tell her, remind her that today is Yom Kippur, right? Which is the suggestion, in other words, that she'll understand um, that if she can, it's better for her not to eat. So Rebbe is saying something beyond what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah is saying, Mishnah doesn't the Mishnah doesn't give us any real restraint on feeding her. Ubara sheiricha machilinota. You feed her. But the Maaseh of Rebbe tells us that you don't have to feed her right away. You can see if you can convince her not to eat. And then the other thing we get, then the other part of the story kicks in, which is that there will be, maybe there will be some kind of a reward or some kind of an ultimate good that comes out of the woman who restrains herself, the pregnant woman who restrains herself from eating on Yom Kippur. Plus, we get this idea that really it's not that the woman herself is hungry. It's really the ubar, it's the fetus that has this desire for the mother to eat. And however you understand that, it's a way of understanding that we talked about when we did the Mishnah. It's a way of understanding why the pregnant woman is a category unto herself. She's not a sick person. She's a person that has another person growing inside of her. She's a completely healthy woman that has another person growing inside of her. And so we treat her differently because of this other person that's growing inside of her. So the story adds in these other layers, and particularly that if the woman feels like she needs to eat, first we remind her that today is Yom Kippur. So that would be a din. That would be a din that comes out of this. Now we have the next story. So Paul, you can read. Hahi
היא עוברה דערכה איתו, אותו,
atu
עטו לקמיה
l'kameh.
דרב, לקמא דרבי
Mhm.
חנינא.
Okay.
אמר להו לחושו לה ולא הכחישה, כי עליה זרו רשעים מרחם Nafak minia
Minei.
shabdai minei shabdai atzar piri
Atzar Peji. Yeah.
atzar piri.
Okay. So let's go through. So the
That's probably a bad guy, but I don't care. Don't
yeah.
according to the
So
context.
right. So
I
what
don't know him.
he's not a good person, but
Mm,
we'll see. Right. We translated it last week that this fellow Shabtai who was a hoarder of fruits, like a tsar from Otsar, like he would gather, like make um um well, a hoard, right? In other words, he would hoarding, like how I'm thinking of another word, but whatever. He would make an otsar of peyrot, so he would go and he would buy up commodities in the shuk, as Rashi is going to explain. He would buy up commodities in the shuk in order to push up prices. He would take things off the market to push up the price, and then he could sell them for more
to make them rare.
to make them rare. Yes.
Mm.
Okay, so the beginning of the story is the same, except here they come before Rabbi Hanina, um, and he says the same thing as Rabbi, right? The chushula v'lo ilchisha, but she didn't accept the chisha, meaning what? She didn't accept what they were whispering to her that today is Yom Kippur. So what does that mean?
They nevertheless wanted to eat.
Yes, so nevertheless she wanted to eat
Mm.
and she
Mhm.
ate.
She ate, yes. Mhm.
Presumably she ate.
According to
So
the dean, they should
right,
feed
and
her.
min hadin, she was allowed to eat,
Mm-hmm.
but for whatever reason, right, when they whispered to her that today isn't that today is Yom Kippur, so she ate anyway. She didn't accept it, and based on what we learned in the previous story, so what do we understand? It's not that she couldn't hold back.
It's the fetus, yeah.
It's the fetus couldn't hold back. The fetus
Mhm.
that didn't disturb that didn't reduce the desire of the fetus for eating on Yom Kippur, and so she ate on Yom Kippur, and so they said this pasuk about her, Zoru Rishaim Merechem. So here, let's look at that pasuk. Okay. So this is a pasuk from Tehillim. Um, uh, Michael, why don't you read? We'll just read the first. It's the fourth pasuk. We'll read the first few pasukim. Lamnatseach.
למנצח אל תשחט לדוד מקטם, האומנום אלם צדק ותדברון מישרים תשפטו בני אדם. אף בלב
Olot.
עולות תפעלון בארץ חמאס בידיכם תפלסון, זורו רשעים מרחם טעו מפתם דברי כזב.
Dovrei Chazav. Okay, so what this is talking about, the here actually the Radak says what the context of this is. So Lamnatseach al tash to the Menatseach al tashchet, that was his name. The David Michtam, for the leader al tashchet by David Michtam, which was a certain kind of poem. So the Radak says, right, Haumnam elem tzedek tidaberun, meisharim tishbetu b'nei adam. The Radak says, Amar ze keneged Avner ben Ner, that David wrote this Tehillah about Avner ben Ner. Anybody know who Avner ben Ner was? Sound familiar?
Was a general of David, no?
He was a general of Shaul.
Shaul.
He was Shaul's general, And after Shaul died, in the beginning, right? So David technically should have become king right away, but that's not what happened. He was made to be king, and he reigned in Hebron over Yehudah, but the rest of the still went after uh, uh, one of the remaining children of Shaul, who himself was um, handicapped, and so really the northern tribes were really being led by Avner ben Ner. Um, so right, he says, Amar ze keneged Avner ben Ner shar sarei Shaul. Shayu shoftim et David kedin mored b'malchut. So Avner ben Ner and these other ministers of Shaul were judging David as if he had been a mored b'malchut. That's what still while Shaul was still alive. That he was that David was a rebel against Shaul. Vayu omrim ki badin haya Shaul rodef acharav. And they said, in other words, they supported Shaul's campaign to kill David. Right? If you remember in Shmuel Aleph, it's at a certain point, Shaul starts to run after David. He becomes insanely jealous of David and has a singular purpose to kill David. And what the Radak is saying is that this Tehillah was written about Avner and the other ministers of Shaul who supported Shaul in his pursuit of David. Ki ilu hem monimoto, right? If they had held him back, lo haya Shaul rodef acharav. In other words, that based on this idea, what it's saying is that David wrote this not about Shaul, but about those people who were around Shaul who supported Shaul's pursuit of him. But if these other people who were his close advisors had approached this properly, they would have advised Shaul. They would have been able to restrain Shaul from running after him. And that's the basis for what he writes. And so what does he say? Ha'omnam elem tzedek tidaberu, mesharim tishpatu v'nei adam. I'm just gonna, for even though I don't like the translation entirely, but they say, do you indeed speak as a righteous company? Do you judge with equity the sons of men? This is what David is saying to the Sarei Shaul. Af belev olot. Olot here is really from the word avil, right? From uh, like iniquity or wickedness. Yes, in heart you work with wickedness. You weigh out, right? Tifalesun. You weigh out in the earth the violence of your hands. And this is our pasuk. Zoru Rishim Merachem. The wicked are estranged. Zoru from the word zar, right? That zar is strange. The wicked are estranged from the womb. The speakers of lies go astray as soon as they are born. So what it's saying, what he's essentially accusing these people of is that they were already, even before they were born, they were wicked. That's how far back their wickedness goes. Um, right. This is the Radak, and he gives the grammar, and then he says, Klomar, tivam betoldotam lasot maseh zar v'ra. It is their nature and the result of their being born to do zar, like strange and evil things. And similarly, the last part of the pasuk, "V'chein ta'u mi beten," They went astray from the womb. Vuhu vuhu kefil inyan b'milot shonot, right? And that's just saying the same thing in different words. Okay, so um, so in our story, yeah, yeah. So in our story, this is what happens, right? So this woman doesn't accept the lechisha, and she eats, and so they say. So what's the assumption? Not that she's a bad person, but that there's already some evil in her child. Zoru Risha'im Meirachem. That already the ubar that's inside her womb is already doing Maaseh Zar. And in fact, Nafak Minei Shabtai Atzar Peri. Um, and that's what Rashi says. Zoru Sheim Merechem Nasu Zarim V'nit Nakru Liavihem Shebashamayim. That these people that David is talking about, they became strange or estranged. V'nit Nakru, right from Nechar, they became uh, uh, also strange in the sense of being a stranger, right? They like removed themselves from their Father in heaven. And Shabtai Yatzar Pere, Michael, here you can read the Hafkiah.
L'havkia sha'arim v'tanya, ein otzrin perot be'eretz Yisrael, v'kol davar shehu chai nefesh, lefi shemafki'in et ha'sha'arim. So
Okay,
he um, like controlled the price.
Hafkiah. Paul, can you explain the Hafkiah? Hafkiah Sharim, do you know that word? Do they use that word in modern Hebrew? Hafkiah. Wait, I'm sorry, you're muted.
להפקיע מחירים, to
What would you
ask
say?
for an exorbitant price or something like this.
Right, right. It's like I don't have a better word right now, but it's like to exaggerate the price.
Exaggerate the price, yes.
Okay, and we learn in a Braita, Ein otzrin
That's what the
perot
supermarkets are
be'eretz
doing,
Yisrael.
yes.
Yes, this is very much in the news. Unfortunately, it's in the news all too often, and especially since January 1st. But that's another za'od ba'aya. But Ein otzrin perot be'eretz Yisrael, right? So here, there's a din. You're not allowed to hoard perot, and like I say, perot here means really commodities, any kind of commodity. B'chol davar shu chai nefesh, anything that's needed for for people to live. In other words, any basic necessities, you're not allowed to hoard them. It's a din in Eretz Yisrael. Why? Lefi shemafkiim et hasharim, because it will exaggerate the price. So
what I said, this pasuk is a pasuk of somebody who believes in predestination, which is not very Jewish because it doesn't have a free choice. He's already born like that. And even before he was born, he was already predestinated, predestined, I don't know.
predestined.
Predestined, okay.
Well, so I don't
to be a good person or a bad person.
So here's the thing. That's why I meant that's I said in passing when we did the first pasuk that this zelo pashut. It's not so simple to say this isn't a Jewish thing because after all, look at Yirmiyahu, look at Shimshon, right? These were people who even before they were conceived, right? Also in that even before they were conceived, they were already mu'ad, right? They were already destined to have a certain place in life. So what happened to their free will? So like I say, that it raises important philosophical issues. What I could say here, without going into all the permutations of different arguments, is it's that the people who said Zoru Shaim Rechem about this ubar um, weren't necessarily declaring that there was no other choice, but maybe what they were saying is that we already have a suspicion that there'll be a tendency in this direction. And even the same thing about Rabbi Yochanan, "B'terem atzacha bebetin yidaticha." That seems that the "B'terem atzacha bebetin yidaticha" I would say, is yoter chazak. But either way, it does raise. It really raises the question that you're talking about, Paul. What about, is it really predestination? So I think in these cases, it's not that necessarily people thought that it's truly predestination, but kvar yesh netiya, right? There's some kind of a bent toward this future behavior. But like I say, for our purposes in Hilchot Yom Kippurim, then what we get from this is that if a woman who's pregnant wants to eat on Yom Kippur, we should first remind her that it's Yom Kippur. The other thing that I want to emphasize here is it's the chushula. You should whisper to her. Why do you think it says whisper to her and not tell her?
Because the din is in fact that she can eat if she wants. So it's more of a suggestion than forcing.
Okay, yeah. Uh, and I would say that the chushula, in other words, you should. It's a way of, yes, of suggesting to her. And I think it indicates that you should be sympathetic and kind, right? You don't yell at her, look, today's Yom Kippur, you should know better, something like that. You whisper to her and say, today's Yom Kippur, you should, right? Divrei Chachamim benachat nishmau, right? That Chachamim's words are heard benachat, right? When they're said in an easy way, in a comfortable way. And I think this is
Or,
an example of that.
or that she shouldn't be ashamed if she nevertheless eats. Because other people around her don't hear what is suggested to her.
Yafen, also. Yes, you shouldn't single her out. Maybe she's sitting in shul and you don't want people to, you just speak to her calmly and quietly and see how it goes. Um, so um, let's read the beginning. Let's read this next part of the sugya, and then I think we'll stop for today. Now we're going to go back to the issue of the choleh. In other words, we're continuing on from the Mishnah. So the Mishnah first talks about the ubara, and now it's going to talk about the choleh. So now the Gemara is talking about the choleh. So Paul, choleh.
כן. חולה מאכילים אותו על פי בקיעים, אמר רבי, that's the din, yes.
Yeah, that's from the
אמר,
Mishnah.
yes. אמר רבי ינאי, חולה אומר צריך, ורופא אומר אינו צריך. וואי, בסדר? שומעים לחולה, מהי טעמה? לב יודע מרת נפשו. פשיטא, מהו דתימה?
The tema. The tema.
דתימה, רופא, קין, ליה, טפי, כמשמע לנו. כמשמע
Right.
לנו.
Kamashmalan. It's Rofei Kim Le Tfei. All right, so let's go back and here explain. So first, chole machilin oto al pi bikiyin. So what did that mean, Paul?
Yes, the specialist decides if you should feed him or not.
Okay, before we go on, let's
The
just
specialists are apparently the doctors. Yes.
presumably the doctors, right? In
Mhm.
other words, certainly
Mhm.
that's how we would see it. So let's just
Mhm.
remind ourselves what the Mishnah said. So like we just read, when it comes to the ubara, machilinota, according to the Mishnah, you just feed her. But chole, machilinota al pi bikiyin.
Mhm.
Right? So that's a difference between the ubara, presumably, right? There's a difference between the ubara and the chole, that the ubara, you feed her. The chole, you feed him according to experts.
Mhm.
V'im ein sham bikin, ma'achirin oto al pi atzmo. And what
Mhm.
if there are no experts? Then you go according to what he says, what the chole himself says. Ad shiomar dai, till he says it's enough. So now, the Gemara brings this din of Rabbi Yanai. So what did Rabbi Yanai say? Is saying, chole omer,
עולה
Paul.
אומר צריך ורופא אומר אינו צריך. They don't agree.
Shomin.
The sick person says, I want to eat, and the doctor says, no, you don't have to. שומעים
So
לחולה. So it
okay,
means that the Beki'in are not, the opinion of the Beki'in is not that decisive.
okay, so how does this compare to the Mishnah, right? What did the Mishnah say, and what does Rabbi Yanai say?
No, according to Mishnah, the Beki'in decide, but here they say the Chole is somehow like the Ubara in the end.
So yeah, so it seems this seems to be against what the Mishnah said,
Yes, yes.
right? Right. In the
Mhm.
Mishnah, you first turn to the Bikiyin. If the Bikiyin say he
Mhm.
needs to eat, then he
Mhm.
eats. But if they say does presumably what I would get from the Mishnah is if the Bikiyin said don't eat, then he
Don't eat,
shouldn't
and
eat.
you are not allowed to eat, yes.
I could understand the Mishnah a little bit differently, though, because I could say, "Chole ma'achilin oto al pi bikiyin," but it doesn't say uh, "ma'achilin oto" implies that when the bikiyin say to feed him, then we feed him.
Mhm.
But maybe chole that ain't that we that how would I put it, that we don't withhold food from the chole al pi bikiyin. In other words, that
Okay,
maybe
the Beki'in, they decide how to feed him, how much, and with which, at which times, so something like this.
so maybe or yeah, that or just what I'm saying is that maybe it's we listen to bikiyin when they're ma'achilin, when they say to eat.
Mhm.
Um, Could be. It's a diuk in the Mishnah because we don't want Rabbi Yanai. We don't want to have a situation where Rabbi Yanai is contradicting the Mishnah. But in any event, with the way Rabbi Yanai, because in other words, what can I say? I could say maybe this was in fact how Rabbi Yanai understood the Mishnah.
Mhm.
That the Mishnah seems to imply that you turn to the bikin and you go after them, but maybe it's only when they say ma'achilin. But if the Rafeh says Eino tzarich, and the Choleh says tzarich, then I listen to the Choleh. And that could be the Hemshech of the Mishnah, V'im ein sham bikiyin, not that they're not there, but meaning if the bikiyin say that he doesn't have to eat, that they're not with that dayah, that he has to eat, then I can be machiloto al pi atzmo. Yeah, it's a little bit of a stretch in the words, but maybe this is how Rabbi Yanai understands the Mishnah. And
It's not this the straight away understanding when
it's not a simple way of understanding the Mishnah.
you,
It's not. But from the Mishnah itself, it does raise this question, right? The question, the Mishnah says that there's this two-tiered approach. If somebody feels they need to eat, so what the Mishnah says, "Chole ma'achilino al pi bikiyin." So somebody who's sick, I think we talked about this at the time we were in the Mishnah. It doesn't say chole sheheriach, right? It just says chole. So the state of the chole, the assumption is that maybe a chole, because of his particular disease, maybe he should eat or has to eat. That's not like the ubara. Ubara, because of the fact of her pregnancy, doesn't tell me that she has to eat, but maybe we know there's certain types of machalot that would make it that the prescription would be that the person has to eat. So the chole, stam chole, would be a person who in this context would be a person who is ill, who may have to eat. And in that case, machilino to al pi bikiin. So when bikiin come and say, yes, this person has to eat, then we feed him. In the Ein Sham bikiin, so like I said, so it could be that in Ein Sham bikiin meaning, well, I think my first diuk was better. That machilino to al pi bikiin is that when bikiin say that he has to eat, then we do feed him. If they say he doesn't have to eat, then from the Mishnah I could say I don't know, because it only says machilino to api bikin. I feed him according to the bikin. In any event, my ta'ama. So what's the reason? In other words, what's the basis for us to say that if there's a difference of opinion between the choleh and the doctor, that I listen to the choleh when he wants to eat? In other words, let's be right, because I'm going to have the opposite case in the next part of the Gemara. What if the Rofeh says he needs to eat and the choleh says he doesn't need to eat? Then who do I listen to? So that'll be the next one. But right now, we're talking about with this case where the choleh says he needs to eat and the Rofeh says he doesn't need to eat. So what's the basis for me listening to the choleh? It's because of this pasuk, Leiv Yodea Marat Nafsho. So what does that mean? Pshuto kamashma'o. Here, I'm not going to go through the other psukim. I think we'll just understand this in its own context. Right? The heart knows the bitterness of its soul. In other words, we know from whatever our individual experiences, we know how we feel. The other side of that is of a simchato lo yitarav zar. In his happiness, a zar, a stranger, will not mix in. In other words, just like when a person is suffering and knows the bitterness of his soul, no one really his heart knows that. And the same way, when he's very, very happy, other people will not be able to grasp the joy of the other person. We're all individuals. In any event, so that's what it's saying here in our Gemara. The reason we listen to the choleh is because Leiv Yodea Marat Nafsho. But then the Gemara said pshita. What's pshita mean?
It's obvious.
What's obvious?
It's obvious that we would feed the chole against the advice of the doctor.
Why is that obvious?
Yeah, no, it's not obvious. Sorry. It's obvious, but then now that I say it,
Well, maybe go ahead.
it's not so obvious now to
It's really not obvious, but maybe the pshita just goes on the pasuk
okay,
that Lev Yodea Marat Nafsho, that you might say that is obvious. In other words, that we understand that each person has an individual feeling which other people can't necessarily relate to. But let's see if we get a little bit more from the Hemshech. Mahu detema. So what would you say? In other words, what would you have thought had we not said what we said? Rofei kimle tfei. The doctor, he knows it better, right? It literally means it's established to him more. In other words, the doctor is the expert, and he's the one who should decide because he really knows the ramifications of whether this person needs to eat or not. But kamash malan. So it comes to teach us. It comes to teach us that even if we assume that the doctor knows more than the patient, then nonetheless, Lev Yodea Marat Nafsho is the overriding uh, machria, right? It's the overriding factor here. And we're going to go after the way the person feels. Nonetheless, I think next week we're going to pick up from here and go on, and you'll see that the next part of the Gemara is the opposite case, uh, and we'll continue. This is where this sugya now is where the Gemara breaks down various possibilities of when there's a difference of opinion between the patient and the doctor, and what if there's a lot of doctors that think one way and other doctors that think another way? What if you get different opinions? And this has real life ramifications. Like this is practical in halacha gam bismanenu. So we'll focus on this a little bit more next time, and we'll also look in halacha, in psak halacha for today. I think this is a good place to stop, and I'm going to wish everybody a good rest of your week and Shabbat Shalom. And maybe by next week we'll have
this route to vote.
Some ostriches. Yeah.
Bezrat Hashem. Okay, Kol Tuv.
All right, thank you. Good night or good day.
יישר
Bye-bye.
כוח.
Laila Tov. Bye bye.